Welcome to the Grief Pod with Venetia Quick. This is a weekly podcast which looks at every aspect of something which has or will at some point affect us all. And that is grief. Whether you've lost a loved one or about to lose someone you know, or perhaps you're simply trying to help someone navigate their grief and don't know where to start or what to say, then perhaps this is the podcast for you. Each week, I'll be bringing you different stories and experiences of loss, love, hope, and at times humour. Andy Preston is a very familiar voice in homes and offices, cars, and anywhere really you have a radio across Dublin. He's a DJ and a radio presenter currently on 98 FM. He's also a former colleague of mine and a friend. So it's lovely to have you on this week's episode.
Thank you very much for having me. I remember doing this years and years ago with our old friend Sasha.
Yeah.
When this whole idea was very, very new.
That's right.
And I thought, well, okay, that's that done.
About 7 years ago now.
Would it be that long? Mm-hmm. Yes, it would be actually, yeah.
And
I thought, well, I'll never do this again. And then I got the message from you last week, will you do it again? So I can't say no to you, obviously.
Yeah, but it'll be interesting to see how, since that conversation, even, you know, where you are now as well. Because I think way back then, everything you've been through was still quite raw and quite new. I suppose for background, we should start maybe at the beginning and with your family, because yourself and your sister, Elaine, were adopted.
We were. And it's interesting that you say how things have moved on and where I am now. There's a bit of a story behind that, which I'll tell you later.
Okay.
Which is familiar to you, given what you've been through.
Yes.
In the last while as well, because I know about that from your own from interviews that you've done and from posts that you've made. But we'll get into that later. But yes, Elaine was the first to go out of. And going back to the first podcast that I did with you and Sasha, there were 4 significant people in my life that passed. But Elaine was the first. I was 18 when Elaine passed away, and she was just 2 months shy of her 14th birthday. She had been diagnosed with asthma when she was around 4. And I remember going up and down to Harcourt Street Hospital when there was a hospital there with my mum for many years. But she just got progressively worse in probably the last 6 months of her life, and was diagnosed with heart problems then in the last few weeks of her life, which was totally new to any of us, because all we ever thought about was asthma, and that was the problem. But the end came just very, very quickly for her then, and it was the 13th of March 1992 when she passed away. And
so it was very sudden in one way, and purely because of misdiagnosis.
Yes, exactly.
So the anger from that misdiagnosis must have been huge for yourself and your family.
For my parents, mainly. They'd been advised by many people to bring a case against Our Lady's Hospital and the doctor that treated her. But for one reason or another, they decided not to. I remember this was in the papers and everything a few months back after Elaine's death then as well, but they just didn't. I just think the death of...
Yeah, well, it's very difficult to have the bandwidth to do anything other than you're trying to survive, let alone do anything outside of that takes an enormous amount of time and effort and strength, I guess.
That's it. It's the grief that you're going through at the time that just engulfs you so much, I suppose, and to bring something else into the equation, like, you know, taking a case against a hospital or a doctor. Perhaps that's why they didn't. They just did not want to go through something like that again. And the pitfalls, the possible pitfalls that could bring. Because, as you can imagine, losing a child, you know, it's the most difficult thing.
Yeah.
It is. It's inconceivable.
And you and Elaine were full siblings that were adopted by Tony and Marie, or
yeah.
Wow.
We were. Now, Elaine, we weren't blood related.
Yeah, okay.
Obviously, she came along 4 years after I was born, and neither of us at that time knew very much about our birth parents. It's something that I came to know a few years later.
Yeah.
Completely by accident, actually.
It's funny how that happens.
I know, isn't it just?
Yeah.
I was always very, and my parents said to me numerous times down through the years, if you ever wanted to trace your background.
So they were very open.
They were,
about...
yes, absolutely. My dad in particular was, because I had more conversations with my dad about it then. And he was very open to the idea, but I was always, and I still am very much of the thinking that my parents, my mother and father, were my mother and father. Nobody else mattered outside of that. There was a point about 20 years ago that I found out a little bit about my birth mother, and subsequently I found out a little bit more since then, because all of this information is open to anybody who wants to find out about it now.
2022.
That's right, yeah.
Things change, and we'll talk a little bit.
We will.
Maybe about that
a little
as
bit
well.
later on, because there is a bit of a story there.
Brilliant. Hopefully a good story.
It is a good story, yeah.
Positive story.
Yeah, it's a story in development, I'd say, for the moment. But,
okay.
We'll see what happens there.
Elaine, did she feel the same way about find her parents, or was she perhaps too young to even for you to have had that conversation?
I remember my mother had the conversation with her. Now, I wasn't there for the conversation, but it was just afterwards she told me that Elaine had said, "I hate my mother. I don't ever want to have anything to do with her." And that's all I ever knew then. I never found out any more, or even if the conversation, was ever had with her again, between her and my parents. So at that particular point, and you have to remember, she was very young. She was, 13.
I'm sure it's very hard to understand why, when you find that out, why anybody would want perhaps not to keep you, and of course Ireland in that time was very, very different to what it is now. Marie and Tony were obviously then bereft of losing their daughter. How did they cope with that in the years that followed?
Not very well.
Yeah.
My mother just completely fell apart. She was just a very, very different person. She was still very joyful. All of my friends loved my parents. They'd come down to the house to see my parents, as opposed to me. And they'd love to spend time. And I think once Elaine passed away, my parents got even more joy out of seeing my friends and spending time with them. And they were always welcome in the house then. I think that was their way of making up for Elaine's loss. But, I mean, I know, and I saw them suffer. I saw rows becoming more frequent between them, even more so than they had before. I didn't help either, because I didn't have a very good relationship with Elaine. In fact, I didn't have a relationship with Elaine at all. So
that then afterwards, when you don't have a good relationship with someone and they die, especially very suddenly and very young, that can be a very, very tricky thing to deal with in your head. Because it's sort of, there's questions, there's perhaps guilt, there's, what ifs.
There's so many what ifs, and I mean, I'm 52 years of age now, and the what ifs are still there every day for me, because what I miss more so than anything is having a sibling, and, having a sibling that I'm close to, and the loss of my mother as well, my dad, it's all, God, what if? If they'd have been around, I wouldn't have made these stupid decisions in my life. They would have been there to stop me now.
Yeah.
Well, of course, that all depends on me as well. And no one is.
But you weren't in the place really after Elaine died, I suppose, to even listen to anybody. Were you, or did you find it? Did you just find being in the family home and being around your parents difficult? Because ultimately they change.
Yes, really, really difficult. And at that point, I would spend as less time at the house as I possibly could. I was involved in radio and DJing in clubs at that point anyway, so that just engulfed my life completely. And I used that as an escape route from spending time at home. and really just because I didn't want to face the same type of grief that they were going through, and I didn't understand either what they were going through. Once the funeral was over with, I thought, that's it, we just move on now. Life continues the way it was before. No, it doesn't. Of course it doesn't, you know. And obviously I didn't view the loss or feel the loss in the same way that they did, because I just wanted to shut it all out and walk away from it.
What was their attitude towards you feeling like that? Because sometimes when you're going through a huge loss and there's somebody that doesn't, like, they may be grieving but they're not really showing the same, you know, they might put something up on Facebook and they're all laughy and you're going, hold on a sec, you were that person's best friend or something. Why are you so happy all of a sudden? Do you know that way? So do you think they found it difficult with you because you weren't showing any grief that they, in the same way or in the way perhaps that they expected you to show?
They did, and I think it was more of the fact that I wasn't a support for them. Particularly my mother as well, who just wanted to talk about Elaine all the time. And if we were out together at family birthdays or meetings or something like that, she'd always carry a little photo album of Elaine in her handbag, like, and was showing photographs to everybody. And that was her way of dealing it. And I just didn't understand it. I just couldn't understand why she wanted constant reminders of Elaine. I get it now as a parent, because I'd be exactly the same. I'd want to talk about whoever all the time. If it was, God help, like one of my kids, when I think of it now, it's just unthinkable. But, and that makes me feel guilty even more for the type of person that I was back then. I just couldn't face it. Just could not face it. I just wanted to move on from it and never talk about it again.
And did you talk to friends or anything about how you were feeling? Probably not. No,
and even if friends did bring it up now, if they talked about Elaine, I'd just brush it off and, you know, go back to talking about something else or move the conversation onto something else. Then I just did not want to face it.
Yeah, because they say once you talk about it, then it becomes real. Then it becomes a sort of a real scenario.
And the thing about it is, and this is why a podcast like this is such a great resource for someone who's gone through grief. Back then, we're talking about the early to the mid part of the 90s. Everything was buried. It was still very much
literally,
Catholic Ireland.
Yeah.
You know, nobody talked about these kind of things. And it was deemed unacceptable, really, to talk about these things, especially for, you know, somebody in their late teens or of that kind of age to open up about that sort of thing. It just wasn't discussed. Whereas I think in 2026 now, if it had happened to me now, I would have been far more open about it. I mean, you know, here I am sitting talking to you on a podcast about this, whereas doing something like that back then would have been just unthinkable.
Your mum passed away then quite quickly after Elaine, on Mother's Day.
That's right.
What happened?
Like I said, she never got over Elaine's death, and even though it was a brain hemorrhage that took her, I always just put it down to a broken heart. That's what brought it on, because she just never ever got over it. And it was a series of brain hemorrhages then that took her. She had the first, I remember, on the Tuesday. I was at a friend's house and got a call there to say, your mum's taken ill, she's been taken to James's Hospital. So I got down there as quickly as I could, and that was actually the last time that I saw her alive on that Tuesday. And she reassured me that everything was okay, because you could imagine I was in a state at that stage. She said, everything's going to be okay, everything's going to be fine. And even at that point, even though it had been a brain hemorrhage, it was quite a mild one. And doctors were convinced that she'd make a full recovery at that point. However, then the next day she was transferred to Beaumont Hospital, and she had a further brain hemorrhage then, a far more serious one. And at that point, doctors were saying, it doesn't look like she's going to make a recovery. And I remember talking to my dad about it. I said, I don't care, you know, I'll look after her once she gets home. I'll put my life into, looking after her. But then on the Saturday, the final brain hemorrhage, and that was the last straw. That was it then. And the last time I saw her then was on life support on the Sunday, just prior to them switching off the life support machine. And that's tough to look back on.
That's a very hard thing.
It's very hard because I, as much as I try to remember her when she was happy and everything was great, ultimately my final memory of her was lying in bed on a life support machine, and I can't even describe the look on her face. It was just a look of pain on her face, and I remember sitting by the bed looking at her thinking, that really just sums up your life. That just sums up your life. It's such an unfair ending.
Yeah, and just even the sort of the whole life support scenario when somebody has to make that decision as well, that things aren't going to get better. It's time to stop.
Yeah.
To be fair to the person, and you question: are you being fair? Stopping? Are you not? Is it who are you being fair to? Is difficult as well.
It is. I mean, we knew at that point there was no hope. There was nothing left of her at that point, because the final brain hemorrhage had just been so devastating and had brought to an end any hope there was for a recovery. The second one was really what did it. And at that point, as I mentioned, doctors were thinking she's not going to have any quality of life after this, but I was still determined to get her home and look after her.
That shock then of losing your mums, and then so soon after Elaine, did the grief for Elaine finally come out when through your grief for your mum?
I can only ever remember one occasion where, and my dad and I didn't even talk about it. I remember going into the house one day. He was sitting by the window with the little coffee table with photographs out. And he was just in tears, looking at photographs of Elaine, looking at photographs of my mum, photographs of us all together on days out and holidays and things like that. And I just sat down on the chair opposite him and burst into tears myself. And when that happens, no words are needed. At that particular moment, I knew that we were just both feeling
in the same moment,
the same thing.
Yeah.
And we didn't say a word to each other. And a few minutes later, I just remember walking away because I couldn't take.
But everything
anymore.
Was said without saying it.
Exactly. I mean, when I think back, it was like something that you would see in a movie. Yeah. But it was real. But it wasn't acted.
Yeah.
It was just what unfolded like in those few minutes.
I think there's so many parts in the journey with grief that are what you've seen in a movie. Like when you're in the room in the hospital, when they bring you into the room, or when somebody's in their final stages, and you are lucky, I think, enough to be able to say goodbye to the person, and they're in the final stages. It reminds you of another movie or another movie scene, and then I think that's part of the shock, is like, oh no, this is really happening.
It is. I mean, it could be something that, and I remember having multiple nightmares when I was a child of one of my parents dying. It was really my worst nightmare. And I think that was brought on from, I remember going into second class in Drimna Castle, which is where I went to school for primary and secondary. And quite short into second class, quite a short time in, one of the lads there, his father passed away. So he would have been maybe 7, maybe 8 at this time. And I remember the entire school was given the day off to go to Michael. Michael was his name. And the entire school was given the day off to go along to Michael's father's funeral. And I, even though this is like going back, 44, 45 years ago, I can still remember.
Yeah, it's the same. I remember
sitting in the church that day thinking, God love him, like his dad, to lose his dad so young. And I would have regular nightmares after that about losing one of my parents.
Yeah, it is. It's funny how, well, not funny, but it just shows the impact of it. When I remember we were all in assembly in school, and there was 4 sisters, and one of them was in my year, and she was great crack and hilarious. And her mum passed away from cancer, and we were told that, like, the whole school together. And I remember after just being so upset, because I thought, what an awful thing. Like, how do you, what do you do?
Yeah.
You know? Your dad, obviously then, he's on his own very quickly after having you and Elaine. Well, he would have had your mum and Elaine in the house, and then suddenly he's on his own.
Yeah. And just the life and soul was taken out of the house then. It just never felt the same. And again,
it's been very quiet coming home and walking through the door.
It was. I tell you what was really good therapy and helped with the healing process for me. The shed in the back garden had a pirate radio station there for the months after my mum passed away. So there was people coming and going constantly. The bulk of them I knew well. You know, they were all friends. So that was helping. And that was help for my dad as well, because, you know, he knew them all. It was great to see them all coming and going. That really, really helped. But that only lasted a few months, and then I ended up in FM 104 after that, like, you know, for another 23 years afterwards.
He didn't keep it on.
No, I didn't keep it. Well, no, it wouldn't have been recommended to keep a pirate radio station on when I was working for a fully legit radio station. So that was made clear to me. Oh, if you're going to come work here, you need to get rid of that. So that had to go.
But I mean, it just shows as well, obviously, apart from the people coming in and out, the whole thing about radio is company.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, even if somebody's on their own, you're a friend to them on the airwaves or whatever. So for your dad, it was like the opposite. You know, it was friends for him because of the people coming and going. How did it change your relationship with him? Or did you find a sort of, I suppose, a common level because you were both now in the same position in one way?
It's because my parents didn't have a very good relationship, and it's something that we talked about in later years, and I suppose it was only like once my mum died that my dad realised how much he depended on her and how much he loved her, but there was never any evidence of that, not from my dad anyway. My mum was the typical old school mum, loyal to her husband, would never say a bad word against him. And I was just very angry, very, very angry towards him when my mum passed away. And I just found it very difficult to reconcile those feelings. I think it was only when I moved out about 3 years later that we had a much better relationship, and that relationship continued up to his death in 2017. Then we had a fantastic relationship after that.
Wow! So it sort of turned around.
It did. It did. It took its time to turn around, and again, it was only when I eventually moved out and spent less time there and would pop down to see him a few times a week that the relationship improved. And again, I think I just didn't understand the way he was feeling, or, you know, what he had gone through in his life, until I became a parent myself and then realised how difficult it was to strike a balance between, you know, working and spending time with a family and doing all the adult things you had to do, like pay bills and that type of thing. I just didn't understand until I was in that position myself, and then I thought,
kids.
Yes, exactly. And then I thought, well, I understand now.
Yeah, because I mean, look, that's part of being a teenager and stuff. You can't possibly understand until suddenly it's like, oh, a €5. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they sort of go, oh,
yeah,
you know. And with, you know, you're obviously your dad then sadly passed away. You were married at this point with kids.
Yes, I was.
So obviously he's your last remaining member of your family at that point. How did that impact then on your own family and your own life?
My dad was ill for many years before he eventually passed. He had COPD. Okay. And it really is a slow and painful death when you have a condition like that, because it just gets progressively worse over time. I think he would have been diagnosed about 13, 14 years before he passed away. So he had a good bit of time, and he was grateful for that, and he was able to do the things that he loved doing. He met someone about 2.5 years after my mum passed away, and she was wonderful to him, absolutely wonderful. I think he would have been gone a lot sooner.
Wow.
Only for Winnie.
Yeah. And you got on with her, obviously.
Not at the beginning.
Yeah. Well,
not at the beginning.
Yeah.
I was young and immature still at that point. And, to be honest with you, my feelings were on that, well, he doesn't deserve it. He treated my mother so badly. And she's no longer here. My dad's got a new partner. He's having a great life. But again, it took a few years to get over that. And once I saw the warm, lovely, genuine person that Winnie was.
And she probably brought that side of him out.
Yes.
Because he'd had that, after your mum died, he'd had that sort of awakening, I guess, to see how people can bring a better side out of you out.
It is, and it just reaffirms my belief that everybody deserves a second chance. Yeah. When something happens, when a death happens, when a marriage breaks up or whatever, if you can find love again and, find someone else to spend your life with and trust and, build a relationship with, I think everybody deserves that.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And he certainly deserved it, and they were good for each other. They were really, really good for each other. Yeah.
Your friend Tony as well, you lost 12, 13 years ago?
God, it's going on 16 years now. It was 2010 when Tony Dixon passed away, and Al outside will have known Tony well because they worked together on the radio back in the day.
I never met him, but I always knew his name. Yeah. He was one of those people, but you've talked about him before and you were very close friends.
We were, and I don't think I realised how close we were until he passed away in November 2010. We didn't have the type of friendship where we'd go out like on the lash for nights out and have wild nights and things like that, because we were never that type of person. Tony led a life very similar to me. He got into DJing and radio at a very young age. He wasn't a drinker, neither was I. We didn't do anything like that. The type of friendship that we had was a very open friendship and very open about our feelings and the things that we discuss. And he was always there for me in that regard. We could just, rather than shooting the breeze about the weather or something like that, we'd just get straight into talking about what was going on in our lives, how we were feeling. He was very, very open in that regard. And I know that I wasn't the only one that he had that type of relationship. He had it with so many other people. Yeah,
so in some ways, like he was, often your friends are your family.
Yes.
And your friends are the ones you go to when things are difficult. And it might be, you might go to a different friend for a different difficult thing, depending on what sort of person they were. So that's like losing another family member in one way.
That's it. I mean, we all have different types of friends that, we relate to on different levels. There's the friend like that, you'll talk about football with or something like that, or you'll talk about music with or politics or whatever, whereas the other friend like is there for a completely different type of reason. And that's the way Tony was for me. I mean, he very much was somebody that I just looked up to. He was the type of person who just wasn't happy unless he was helping others. He was very successful in what he did, both in his radio career. He managed nightclubs for many years as well. That's how I got to know him before he ever came to work for FM 104, I worked for him in a few nightclubs, and eventually he ended up working in FM 104 then in sales, and completely revolutionising the sales department there for the years that he was doing that.
Wow.
And he was so passionate about what he did. He was one of the early champions of soul music, when soul music wasn't at all dominant in this country. It was very much an underground thing at that point. By the time the 90s came along, the mid-90s, and R&B and hip-hop began to infiltrate the music scene, Tony was all over that. Well, he'd been doing it for years beforehand, and all of a sudden it was a commercial thing, and songs were going to #1 of the charts. Artists were coming over here and selling out venues.
Yeah.
I remember he brought Trevor Nelson's Lick Party from MTV. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
He brought that to Lily's Bordello.
That's
in
right.
1999.
Yeah.
And that was a huge coup for him at the time, I remember. So, there was an episode of the Lick Party filmed, and Lily's Bordello, Trevor Nelson was there, Tony was DJing and everything. I think that was probably one of the proudest moments of his life.
Trevor Nelson was the man.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, Trevor Nelson to the UK scene was, and in many respects is, what Tony was to the scene over here. So, it was a marriage, of two complete legends coming together, in a different place.
Yeah. How do you feel now that you look back on everything you've gone through, and all your family, your mum, your dad, your sister, Tony as well? How do you feel so many years on? Do you feel you're still, obviously you still grieve every day, and there must be still moments that something reminds you of your mum, or something reminds you of Elaine, or your dad? Do you feel more accepting to what's happened?
Well, you know only too well after, and I know it's coming up to the 8th anniversary of Martin's passing.
Yeah.
Because I remember that time very, very well. My marriage came to an end in around the time that your Martin passed.
Wow.
And I remember saying to you the last time.
And that was actually just after your dad died.
It was. Yeah, it was just almost a year after my dad passed away. And I remember when it had all started to kick off, and my dad was in the last few months of his life, and I didn't want to tell him, but I had to tell him because I had to have somebody to talk to about it. And at that point, he was in the last few months of his life. He could barely talk at that point. That's how little energy that he had. But bless him, he'd ring me every day to make sure that I was okay, and he'd talk to me about it and everything. It was one of the many times that my dad surprised me. He was a very laid-back guy, didn't want any complications in his life, didn't want to take sides with anybody and anything. He preferred just being in the middle and being there for everybody. But he completely threw himself into my problems and what was going on in my life at that time. And I'll never forget him for that. And I think it brought us even closer at that point as well.
So he was there.
He was there. Him. But just to answer your question, to go back to the original question, I'm a great example of time, how time heals. And I'll never heal fully over the loss of those people. As you say, the memory is always there, and something just triggers it out of the blue. Something will just bring you back to a certain time, certain point, something that you went through together, or maybe a good day, maybe a bad day, and all of a sudden tears fill your eyes. I'm sure you know that feeling.
Oh, ridiculous.
Anybody who's gone through this will relate to that. But for anybody who is just facing grief for the first time, not even the first time, it could be a year, a couple of years down the line, the best advice that I can give to somebody is just trust in time. Trust in time, no matter what situation you are in life. And that's very easy for me to sit here and say, to trust in time, because I've gone through it, and with the passing of time, I find it easier to live with now. But it really just comes down to time and being patient with yourself and letting the bad days come and go.
And going through them.
Yes.
We talked briefly just at the beginning, and we'll just maybe finish on this if you want, if you're happy to talk about
Absolutely.
it. You and Elaine were both adopted.
We were.
Adoption laws changed in 2022 as well, meaning that more people could have access to their birth parents. Did you go down that route, or what was the...
I didn't. Before I could go down that route, somebody else went down that route and then found out about me.
Oh.
That's what happened there. I was told probably about 23, 24 years ago that I had a brother. And I was very excited by this when I found out.
Yeah.
And it took me probably a good year, 2 years after I'd been told this to approach my dad about it. And one night I was out with him and Winnie, and I just out of the blue I said, "Look, I've been told that I have a brother. Is that true?"
Was this your dad's son,
No,
or was
no,
a birth
from my birth
biological?
mother? Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Wow.
And he said, "Well, that's the first I've heard of that." He said, "Do you know what I'm going to do?" He said, "I'm going to go into the adoption agency and try to find out something." And the adoption agency that had handled mine and Elaine's adoption was on South Ann Street at the time. Cunov, I think, was the name of the...
That's the name of it.
That's the one.
Yeah.
Because would you believe, even though I was only about 4 years old at the time, the day that my parents got Elaine, I can still clearly remember, as clear as anything, sitting in the room in that office in South Ann Street and Elaine being brought in and given to my parents.
Yeah.
You know, I can close my eyes and still see that. And when my dad said that, I said, yeah, you know, he won't do anything, you know. The very next day, himself and Winnie went to the adoption agency, or there was something still there at the time, could still be on South Ann Street, and made an inquiry then. So it came back a few months later. I mean, it's unbelievable to think how slowly these things moved at the time, but they did. They moved really, really slowly. A few months later, anyway, the agency made contact with me, and they said, "Well, no, we've nothing on our records for a brother or any sibling. We have a bit of information which we'll give you." Months and months passed by then, and 2 years later, then they called me and asked me to come into the office, and they handed me a letter with details of my birth mother, who was from rural Ireland. It turned out, according to what I found out, that she had a brief fling with a married man.
Okay.
I was conceived. She went to live in what is Dunboyne Castle now. It's a hotel, but at that point it was a residence for... it was a mother and baby residence, you know, for anybody who ended up in trouble. Back then, they usually went here, and she gave birth to me then in Hollis Street in January 1974. And 3 weeks after that, I ended up with Tony and Mary, my parents. So my name was Richard. My birth mother named me Richard.
Wow.
And of course, Andy Preston's not my real name. It's a stage name, you know.
Don't ruin the illusion.
I'll always be Ian Moore from Galtymore Road from Drimnah, you know.
Yeah.
But, you know, I just adopted this ridiculous stage name 39 years ago, and I've been stuck with it ever since.
You're not the only one.
No, there's plenty of others. Like, let's not go outing anybody here now. We won't get into that. But that's how it all happened anyway. So, yes, as you mentioned, it's funny you say 2022, all of this was brought out into the open. And if you're an adopted person, you can go and trace your roots, your beginnings, and take it from there. But all of a sudden, one afternoon, I'd got in from work and there was a letter from Tuzla. And it said, "We believe we've found somebody who is related to you." So straight away I picked up the phone and rang the gentleman who had sent the letter. And I said, yes, Ian Moore, that's me. And he said, yes, you have a sister. Her name is Kate. She lives in Limerick. And of course I was ecstatic, like, upon hearing this, you know. And he said, would you mind coming in to see us, because there's a little bit more to this? I thought, okay.
Yeah.
So I think around about a week or two later, I went in after work one day and sat down to speak with him. And he said, well, it turns out you have 6 siblings.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow. All from your mum, your birth mother?
Yes, all from my birth mother.
But different dads, we assume?
Yes, I think I'm the eldest. So there's 6 more below me. I think 3 of them have the same father. The rest of us have different fathers.
Wow.
So I've met with, because there's so many, like I'm trying to count in my head how many I've actually
Are they
met.
all aware of you, or
They are, yeah. There's one in particular who doesn't want anything to do with this situation, and that's fair. That's absolutely fair. I probably shouldn't say any more than that now, just to protect the privacy of the others as well. But that first sister that I met, Kate, I'm close to. You know, we keep in touch with each other. The others, the relationship is a little bit more difficult. Yeah, because I've had to take a little bit of time just to get used to the situation.
Well, it's a very sort of, it's you know, it's a quite a strange situation to be in.
It is.
Having been in that situation,
yes,
it's worked out really wonderfully for me. You know, and I think, you know, but it's with some people, maybe they don't have the same experience. You know, for whatever reason, it just doesn't. You know, I think with some people, I now feel there was a missing part, and now that missing part is complete.
And that's wonderful to
sometimes
hear.
You don't realise it until it happens.
It doesn't work out that way for everybody, unfortunately, for
everybody.
whatever reason. You know, because, you know, maybe the circumstances are just too difficult for one to get their head around. Then, you know, maybe there's, you know, we've all had personality clashes, like with friends or siblings or whatever.
But I think sometimes, like, when you lose somebody as well, somebody else is sent.
Yes.
And maybe you got Kate for not replacing Elaine, but as a sort of somebody, a new sort of sibling relationship to move forward with.
Yeah.
That's lovely.
So, I mean, as I say, I mean, it's 4 years. It's almost 4 years down the line now, and there's still an awful lot to do. And
there's a lot of years to catch up on.
There's a lot of years to catch up on, but I think it's something that I need to work a little bit harder on. But give me time.
Yeah.
Give me
Andy,
time.
thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Thank you for listening to this episode of The Grief Pod with Venetia Quick. You can listen on SoundCloud or wherever you get your podcasts. We also have an online community on Facebook, The Grief Pod, or on Instagram @GriefPod Series.